My name is Quentin Millington, and today I'm here to talk to you about the economist Milton Friedman. His ideas have had a massive influence on how business has been done over the last 50 years. And even though he died in 2006, he still influences our lives today. Before we get to Milton, let me introduce you to Michael. He's even more important. Michael works for a bank. His office is in London. And like us, Michael's a customer of many different businesses. Because he lives 35 miles outside London, he commutes into work. And so he's a customer of a railway. It's not an easy ride for him. He sees three areas of difficulty as he interacts with this business. The first is the basic train service. Trains are often late, they don't run on time, there aren't enough of them, so they're overcrowded and claustrophobic. He sees staff cuts on trains and ticket offices at customer service centres. There aren't enough people to do the work. Carriages are dirty. When he sits down, there are crumbs and dried lettuce all over the place. Lose half the time or out of order. Thirdly, the staff are also quite grumpy. They're not so helpful or attentive. They won't go the extra mile, which is kind of odd when you think that this is a train company. In corporate speak, they're just not so engaged. Prices have gone up, admittedly, mostly only with inflation. But his season ticket costs him quite a lot, and his commute leaves him feeling stressed and ratty and unhappy. This business is really only doing the basic things for its customer. And Michael can relate to the union leader who said, well, at least Dick Turpin had the decency to wear a mask when he robbed his passengers. Now, I got to hear of Michael from Sarah. Sarah works for the railway, and I bumped into her on a flight to Hong Kong, where I wasn't speaking Chinese. We got chatting. She was pretty exhausted, and she was heading off for her holiday. I asked her about her work, and as she talked, she got more and more stressed. She wasn't grumpy, but she was certainly on edge. As head of organizational enhancement, Sarah has two main objectives. The first is to improve the quality of Michael's commute. The second is to help her colleagues have better experiences at work. But it's a hard slog. Money's tight. The company runs rolling stock until the wheels almost literally drop off. She's got concerns about health and safety. There have been cuts to catering, and so customers are complaining about the food. Recently, they brought in a new online service, but that was really about cutting costs. So trust has become quite low for both customers and for employees. The company's not investing in training, pays below average, and when you combine this with low hours, the morale and engagement across this organization are quite low. It's not surprising that attrition runs at over 15%. Sarah's job has lots of red tape. Budget approvals can take months or years. The management team doesn't always have time to respond to her queries. She works long hours and has no social life. Sarah drank another wine and admitted that when she goes home, she often takes things out on her cat. Now, Ginger here, as you can see, is fairly innocent, and he really shouldn't have to worry about the shoes that Sarah's wearing of an evening. I also believe that Sarah and her colleagues, disengaged colleagues, are fairly innocent. And the management team may not be quite as guilty as you think. But the railway isn't working for employees either. And I suggested, well, perhaps rather than kicking Ginger, you might want to think about blaming Milton Friedman. And she asked, who's he? So here's Milton Friedman, happy soul, as you can see. He was an economist, he's no fool, won the Nobel Prize in 1976. He was an advisor to Margaret Thatcher and to Ronald Reagan. And he was a big believer in free markets. He was opposed to government intervention. He thought that markets always worked, and that only markets would work. When it comes to business purpose, he wrote an article for the New York Times in 1970, and he said the sole purpose of a company is to generate shareholder value. Any executives with a goal other than making money, according to Milton, are unwitting puppets trying to undermine free society. His article was influential, and this making money became the new gospel of business. You may have heard of Jack Welsh. He was the CEO of General Electric, and he became a poster child for Milton Friedman's ideas. He was an outstanding implementer of this idea of generating shareholder value. From 1981 to 2001, he took the market capitalization of GE from 14 billion to 484 billion. The theory predicted that executives were paid in stock, then they'd focus on company performance. In practice, what happened was that compensation rocketed and long-term performance fell. companies obsessed with shareholder value actually returned fairly poor financial outcomes. Deloitte's Shift Index reveals the long-term forces on the economy. From 1965 to 2009, return on invested capital fell by over 3/4. In other words, when you focus on shareholder value, when you focus on making money, it's bad for business. Milton's theory failed on its own fairly narrow terms, those of making money. In the 10 years after Jack Welch left GE, the market cap of that company dropped 60%. And in March 2009, he was interviewed by the Financial Times, and he said, shareholder value is the dumbest idea in the world. Shareholder value is the result, not a strategy. And the main constituencies, employees like Sarah, customers like Michael, and the communities that businesses serve. Despite all the evidence and Welch's U-turn, companies still put financial outcomes first. Sarah's employee experiences, Michael's customer experiences, experiences of many others as they interact with the business, are shaped by this preoccupation with short-term monetary gain. When I talk to executives, people get all of these ideas, but the pressure to return profits, especially when the economy is volatile, make it really, really hard. So in practice, the first purpose of most organizations is still to make money, even though, as we just saw, it doesn't usually work. Now, one very influential man is trying to change all of this, and that man is Larry Fink. He's the chairman, co-founder, and chief executive of BlackRock, which is the largest asset manager in the world. They look after $6 trillion of money. That's an awful lot. It likely includes the pensions of Michael and Sarah and many other people they know. Every year, Larry sends an open letter to CEOs. This February, his letter was entitled A Sense of Purpose. You can read it on the BlackRock website, but it goes approximately as follows. Since the 2008 financial crisis, people with money to invest have done pretty well. And 2017 was really a bumper year. The money you make on investments, dividends, rents, are mostly up. That's a good thing in some ways. But wages are growing much more slowly, and the cash that people have doesn't generate the same return as some of these other assets. In other words, it's easier to do well when you have capital, and it's harder to do well when you work for a living. We're all familiar with the social problems that hit the headlines, but governments are struggling to resolve these, and Larry sees business as a part of the solution. He says that companies have got two obligations. The first is to deliver strong financial performance, as has always been the case, and the second, increasingly, is to make a positive contribution to society. In short, one of the world's most powerful representatives of shareholders says that business is not just about making money. Business is about taking care of employees, of customers, of society at large, and of course, shareholders. How can companies achieve this? They should embrace, Larry says, a sense of purpose, the title of his letter. If they don't, they're going to distribute their earnings to shareholders, and there won't be enough money left in the pot for developing people, building better products, and harnessing new technology, which, as we know, is increasingly important. And what happens when companies can't do these things? Well, they make less money. The products stagnate, so customers suffer. They stop investing in learning, so employees suffer. Corners are cut, so society suffers when there are ecological disasters and the like. Money's lost, so shareholders suffer. Larry sees pursuing near-term profit as ultimately bad for people and bad for business. Jack Welch today is likely to agree with him. Back to Sarah's bosses then. Isn't it time that they took notice to some of these arguments? If all this sounds like bashing people who run companies, then it's certainly not intended to be. To some extent, they're between a rock, if you'll forgive the pun, and a hard place. We know that company focus on long-term is better, but there are lots of short-term expectations. If you're running a public company, You have to meet quarterly earnings targets. If you're running a small private company, you're probably worrying about paying the bills every day. In 2013, the markets got agitated about a profit warning from Unilever. And Paul Polman, who's a big advocate of purposeful business, stuck to his guns and stayed with his long-term plan. This takes lots and lots of courage. Nor am I saying that capitalists and money are evil. And when we talk about purpose, I think we've got to be really careful about not demonizing wealth creation, business, and making money. Since China opened its doors to capitalism 30-odd years ago, 700 million people have been lifted from extreme poverty. Worldwide, life expectancy has gone up from 64 years in 1990 to 70 years in 2012. That's more than double what it was in 1900. The share of the population, the world's population, living on less than 2,000 calories a day has gone from 51% in 1965 down to 3% at a most recent measure. Our business system is a good system, but it does need some recalibration. And a big step forward is for businesses to embrace a purpose beyond making money and beyond shareholder value. And that's going to enable some of the sort of purposeful lives that Sarah was just talking about. What is purposeful business then? Purpose is the reason an organization exists. It's the business's calling, if you will. It answers the question, how would the world be worse off if this business didn't exist? Purpose is about balancing the interests of people, of finances, and of the planet. I'd like to suggest there are 5 qualities of a purpose-led business, and these would apply to any business, regardless of size, regardless of industry, regardless of age. The first thing is that a purposeful business benefits people by design. It brings value through what it does on a day-to-day basis. Purpose is not corporate social responsibility, or CSR. The companies that invested most in CSR were companies such as tobacco organizations. It was CSR in many cases was selling harmful products with your left hand and then watering villages in Africa with the right. The main reason for CSR, a study of some 700 academic papers found, was actually financial gain. That was the biggest driver. Purposeful companies embrace purpose for its own sake because that's what they want to do. That's what they're set up to do. Second, a purposeful company balances lots of diverse interests. As we've talked about, it looks after shareholders' interests, but it also cares about customers' experiences. It doesn't sell harmful products. It's transparent about prices. It takes care of employee well-being and ensures that they can work toward that work-life blend that we just heard about. It pays fair wages. If you consider society at large, a purposeful business is going to be mindful of its impact on the planet. It's going to be mindful of its impact on suppliers. Third, a purposeful business will view people as an end, not a means. This is absolutely crucial. Milton saw people as the warm-blooded means to the cold end of shareholder value and profits. Purposeful business sees people as the main beneficiaries. They see Jane, not the head of accounts. People who walk into the shop are individuals, not high-level prospects. As we wave goodbye to Milton, we should abandon the term human resources, because that's not what people are. They're more than that. A purposeful business does no harm. Can't be all things to all men, but it must balance the interests of different stakeholders. Sometimes these are in conflict with each other, and it can't do good for everyone. But it doesn't work employees into the ground to serve customers. It doesn't compromise health and safety to increase margin. Purpose-led companies seek creative solutions to what seem like paradoxes. And it creates shareholder value as a byproduct. The valid concerns about Milton's theory don't mean we have to abandon profit, but people come first. So let's just have a think about some examples. These are, there are a few here. I think they're considered to be fairly good examples of descriptions of companies. To improve the quality of human life by enabling people to do more, feel better, and live longer. That's Glaxo. To embrace the human spirit and let it fly. Virgin Atlantic. To refresh the world in mind, body, and spirit. This is Coca-Cola. My view is perhaps they should have stopped at that point. I'm not sure that the final two sentences really add a great deal. To put smiles on the faces of everyone we touch. That's Nintendo. So purpose statements are short, they're personal, they're quite emotional, and they're visual. How do we make all of this real then? Well, there are lots of people talking about purpose, individual purpose and corporate purpose. I'd like to just highlight a couple of organizations that are doing interesting things. The Blueprint for Better Business has 5 principles of a purpose-driven business. It's about being honest and fair with customers and suppliers. It's about being a good citizen, which means paying taxes and considering how people are influenced by the business. It's a responsive and responsible employer. That means treating people with dignity and fostering innovation and accountability. It's a guardian for future generations. It invests in protecting the natural world. And then 5th, it has a purpose which delivers long-term sustainable performance, which is what we've been talking about all along. It operates true to a purpose, and it generates a fair return for investors. And if you think that the whole purpose thing is woolly, take a look at Contextus. Contextus is a model. There's a lot of academic support. We can't go into it today. But essentially, it allows you to measure purpose, and it takes the factors of purpose. Purpose provides content, it encourages ownership, and it fosters trust. These things, these cultural attributes, translate through some very measurable things, such as engagement and adaptability and clarity, into company performance. Some obligatory statistics. I think they're probably fairly clear. Performance helps your people, purpose helps your people to be more productive, 14% more than a non-purposeful company. They're more engaged, more satisfied, and they stay longer. They're much less likely to leave. When it comes to the customers and the market side of things, 74% of people, don't care if the brands they use disappear. That's a big problem for business. 75% of people say that brands should care about individual well-being, but only 40% do. And overall, back to the nub of the question, when you look at employee and customer factors over a 10-year period, and you look at what happens for companies that are not purpose-led, the benchmark in the industry, purposeful brands outperform by more than a factor of 2. In summary, then, the Deloitte Shift Index has something that's called a topple rate. That's the rate at which successful, mostly big companies lose their leadership position. That's doubled, and it continues to accelerate. It's a tough time for business, both big and small, whatever the size of your organization. But the evidence is clear. Milton Friedman was wrong, and Larry Fink is right. To thrive, companies need to embrace a purpose beyond profit, beyond money, beyond shareholder value. If the railway company is to make Michael a happy customer and Sarah a satisfied and fulfilled employee, it's got to find a way to do good things for people, make money, yes, so that it can keep doing good and give people good, positive financial outcomes. And it has to do all of this without damaging the planet. That's what a purposeful business is all about. Thank you very much.